you've been in this a long time. There's a famous statement that was made of Joseph Chamberlain, not of Neville Chamberlain, but of Joseph Chamberlain, that all political careers end in failure. Do you think that's the case with you?
I don't care.
You don't care?
No, I don't care. This whole, the whole legacy obsession is one that I don't really care very much for. I'll tell you why. Because first of all, it depends who writes the history. And history now is being rewritten in Wikipedia and all that. You know, people just distort history. You can't really control that. What you can do in the time allotted to you on this earth is to do your best to serve the purpose that you dedicate your life for. I've dedicated my life to ensuring that in the coming decades, Israel will be as strong and as powerful and as prosperous to ensure the questionable permanence of anything, but the permanence of the Jewish state. I say that with a philosophical observation that what is permanent? But that's what I'm allocating and dedicating my efforts to. So I don't really care about that question. You can't control it. Unless, as Churchill said, you write it yourself. Well,
you could write it yourself. You've already
I did.
started.
I wrote
an
autobiography. Yes, I did. But that's just to have my record there.
First of all, Prime Minister Netanyahu, thanks so much for joining me.
That's my pleasure.
Can we start at the very beginning? On October the 7th, Israel suffered what you've described as perhaps the worst day in its history. Attacks by thousands of terrorists from the south. One of the things that struck me, speaking to families and others here, is the number of them who said things like, said to their children, "Don't worry, the IDF will be here in minutes." What went wrong that day?
Quite a few things, and we'll examine it when the war's over. But I described it actually as the worst violence, the worst savagery perpetrated against Jewish people since the Holocaust. The difference between what these savages did to us and what the Nazis did to us is not very big. They basically wanted to annihilate every Jew. That's the Hamas charter calls for the murder of every Jew on earth, and certainly of the Jewish state. The difference was not in intent, the difference was in capability. In the death camps of the Nazis, they murdered thousands of Jews each day and we could do nothing. Here they murdered 1,200 innocent people, and the next day, even though we had these failings on that day, which will be examined, we rolled them back. And now we're going after these Hamas monsters in Gaza. That's the difference that Israel has made. We now have the capacity to defend ourselves, and even if we have failings, which we did, we can defend ourselves by fighting back, something the Jewish people couldn't do in the Holocaust.
I know there will be an inquiry to come, but do you have a sense already of, there's so many people in this country saying that the tech failed, that the IDF didn't get there in time, all sorts of things just seem to have gone wrong.
Yes, and quite a few. And yes, I have an idea, but I think it's premature to talk about it. Operationally, we've reached quite a few conclusions, and we're putting them into effect. But remember, this war is ongoing. We're in its fourth month. It took the U.S. and its allies 9 months to vanquish ISIS, to vanquish the radical Islamic forces in Mosul. Mosul is smaller than Gaza, didn't have this vast terror underground infrastructure, had fewer fighters. So we're on course, but it's going to take some time. And in the meantime, yes, we have learned some lessons, which I don't think it's right for me to impart them here.
Now, you have a number of objectives in your war, stated objectives in your war against Hamas, but one of them is to defeat Hamas, and another is to negotiate to release the hostages. Aren't these things mutually incompatible?
No, because if they both share one thing: you need military pressure. The only thing that gets Hamas to release the hostages is military pressure. That's why we've already released roughly half of them. And I think that's a major achievement. And we intend to release a lot of them. I think that the only way that you're going to achieve that and to achieve the victory over Hamas is by applying military pressure. And that's what we're doing. I won't get into the question of how we're going to complete it because we're thinking about that too. But it's a fact that until we applied military pressure, we couldn't get anyone. We had people held up in Hamas's hands for years, and we couldn't get them out. But once we start applying military pressure, all of a sudden we can get them out.
Now, the US and others of your allies want you to wrap up the war in Gaza as soon as possible. But everyone you speak to here believes, rightly I think, that it's going to be months of war to come. How do you reconcile those two things, keeping your allies happy, but doing what you feel you need to do in Gaza?
We have to win in Gaza. We have to achieve total victory. Hamas cannot be left standing, coming out of the ruins with a V sign and saying, we'll do it again and again and again, which they promised to do. So first, for our own sake, for our own future, we have to defeat these monsters. Secondly, I don't think it's just our case. It's also the case, as I've told President Biden, I've told all the leaders who came here, I said, this is your war as well, because this is not merely a minor skirmish. This is part of a major confrontation between the moderate axis of Israel and the moderate Arab states against Iran, the terror axis of Iran, who is the three H's, Houthis, Hezbollah, Hamas, and others. And the whole world is now watching. Who's going to win? They're sitting in the bleachers. Who will win? Will Iran win or will Israel win? Will they win or will the West win? So I think that what I say to our American friends, whose help I appreciate a great deal, I said, the war will take as long as it takes, but it will result in total victory because our battle is your battle and our victory is your victory as well.
Let me come on to some of the international aspects of that. The day after in Gaza, for instance, there's talk about the fact that, of course, Gaza's schools need reform, the educational, they have to stop teaching hate and much more, but there are international organizations that were meant to be ensuring that for a decade and a half now, and clearly they didn't. Who on earth is meant to be in charge of Gaza after this is over?
Well, one thing is clear. It shouldn't be UNRWA, because UNRWA, the United Nations special agency that was set up for the Palestinians, in fact, perpetuates the Palestinian refugee status, because otherwise that's their bread and butter. But far worse than that, we discovered that there were 13 UNRWA workers who actually participated either directly or indirectly in the October 7th massacre. UNRWA is perforated with Hamas, and UNRWA is, in UNRWA's schools, they've been teaching the doctrines of extermination for Israel, the doctrines of terrorism, lauding terrorists, glorifying terrorists. So obviously that has to change. We need in Gaza not only a full victory against Hamas and demilitarization, sustained demilitarization that can only be handled by Israel. If you have another international force that can fight the resurgence of terrorism, let me know. And the third is we need a force there for internal management that does not educate the children of Gaza to become terrorists, does not fund terrorists, and does not dispatch terrorists. Doesn't teach the annihilation of Israel. That's what we need. I can tell you how the first thing and the second thing will be done. We're working on the third. De-radicalization takes time and takes commitment.
But what international allies do you have to help ensure that happens?
Well, I hope that any fair-minded government, any government that can withstand for 5 minutes or even several months the force of anti-Israel propaganda will understand that their future is intertwined with ours. Because if barbarism wins here, Europe will be next. America will be next. Iran will emerge victorious. Iran will, unchallenged, will conquer the Middle East. Iran will develop unchallenged nuclear weapons. It will have ballistic missiles to threaten Europe and the United States. This is part of a larger battle, and everyone has a stake in Israel's winning. Can governments go beyond the immediate pressures that that are leveled at them?
The pressures of thousands of people on the street.
Yes, thousands of people on the street. Let me tell you, I think in America, the great majority of people support Israel. They understand instinctively that Israel is fighting their battle. They understand instinctively what the terrorists, the radical Islamists say. They say, we're the small Satan, America's the great Satan.
Britain's
You
kind of-
Europeans, I don't want you to be offended, but you're a middle-sized Satan.
A middling Satan.
A middling Satan, okay? But for them, this is all one big battle of civilization, our civilization against their wanton aggression, their violence, their rejection of all the values that we hold dear, the ideas of liberty, of choice, of freedom, the rights of women, the rights of minorities, the rights of gays. All of that they want to sweep away. And the question is, do we stand or do we fall? We stand. We're committed to doing it. We have no choice. I think deep down in their hearts, all the leaders that I talk to, you know what they say to me? I'll say not all, okay? Nearly all, okay? That allows everyone to be the exception if they don't want to admit what they actually said to me. They say, we know you have to crush Hamas. We know that you have a just cause, but we're having problems with public opinion. So please help us out. Well, we're doing everything in our power to minimize civilian casualties against an enemy, Hamas, that is perpetrating a double war crime. They not only target our civilians, murder our civilians, rape women and behead them, burn babies alive. They not only target civilians, they hide behind civilians, their own civilians. That's a double war crime. And we're fighting this very difficult war, not to give immunity to the terrorists because they hide among civilians, calling on the civilians to leave, sending them leaflets, calling them on their phones, telling them to leave. Many of them do leave, even though Hamas is trying to prevent them at gunpoint and with gunfire. And Israel should be given the credit that it's fighting both a moral war and a necessary war. Most of the leaders that I talk to, they get it. But it's a question of whether they can withstand the pressures. We can. I hope they can too.
Well, let me move on to another border and perhaps another war. I was here in 2006 during the Hezbollah Second Lebanon War. That war eventually came to an end with Resolution 1701 at the United Nations, which meant that Hezbollah was meant to not stockpile munitions to fire at Israel south of the Litani River. That hasn't been obeyed as far as I can see at all. I was up in the north again the other day, and you can see the Hezbollah bases. And I saw the footage of UN vehicles coming out of their base, Hezbollah firing rockets into Israel, and the UN vehicles just did a U-turn and went back, and that's the peacekeepers. Is war in the north inevitable?
It's up to Hezbollah, because we're not going to accept a situation where Hezbollah attacked us on October 8th, a day after the massacre, unprovoked. 100,000 of our citizens along the northern border left their homes. We cannot accept that they won't return. They have to return.
When can they return?
They'll return when Hezbollah's aggression stops and when Hezbollah forces are removed from the immediate vicinity of our border. That has to be arranged. Now, we can achieve that either with diplomatic means or with military means. If necessary, we'll do it with military means.
Diplomatic means have been tried, and they haven't worked, have they?
No, they haven't worked because I think Hezbollah overestimated their capacity, their military capacity, and underestimated our military capacity, and more importantly, our resolve. We've been exchanging blows, but our blows are very significant. You know, Douglas, 3.5 months ago, before this war began, we were debating, this is known, whether to remove a tent, a Hezbollah tent, right next to the border fence between Israel and Lebanon. Well, you know, we've gone a considerable distance beyond that. You follow all the things that we do in Lebanon against Hezbollah forces, against Hamas forces, hosted by Hezbollah in Beirut and elsewhere. We act, and we're absolutely determined to remove this threat from our northern border. Again, can be done. But it can be done peacefully, or it can be done militarily, and we're determined to achieve that.
Let's say you have to do it militarily, which seems to some of us to be the most likely outcome, let's say. What international support would you have for that, given the tense relationships the world seems to have with what you've already been doing in Gaza?
Look, we have to do, you know this statement, a man's got to do what a man's got to do?
I do.
Remember the days when you could actually say that? Well, today you say, a person has to do what a person has to do, okay? Well, let me extend that. A nation has to do what it has to do to survive. And if we have to take action both in the South and in the North that is understood by many to be a just action but they cannot stand the heat of public opinion, then we'll just have to do it alone. And we'll do what we need to do.
Word is, you don't have to confirm whether it's true or not, but word is that Secretary Blinken referred to that Israel didn't have credit for a much longer war in Gaza. How would America believe that you had enough credit, if that reported phrase is right, to begin a war or continue a war in Lebanon?
I think American public opinion and the American polity in general, not its extremes, especially on the ultra-progressives, but most of the Americans across the political divide understand that Israel is fighting a just war, that Hezbollah and the Houthis and Hamas are the bad guys, and Israel are the good guys. Admittedly criticized inordinately with I was going to say a double standard, but that's, I'd settle for a double standard. One standard for the dictatorships, one standard for the democracies. There's a triple standard here, a special standard reserved for a democracy called Israel. It's everybody, of the leaders that I speak to, they all understand that. But again, we'll do what we need to do. Israel will do what it needs to do to protect itself. I think that there is a larger element here because Hezbollah too is an integral part of the Iranian axis.
Well, I want to come on to that in a second, but before we do, can we just touch on Qatar quickly? You had enormous success in recent years with the Abraham Accords of countries in the region signing agreements, normalization agreements with Israel. But there's a number of countries that stand out, and perhaps most obvious is Qatar at the moment. Qatar hosts the leadership of Hamas, it funds Hamas, it also funds significant amounts of infrastructure, is invested in infrastructure in countries like Britain, in the United States, just been caught spying on a number of US senators. What should the West's attitude towards Qatar be?
I think we should demand from Qatar that hosts Hamas leaders, they host Hamas leaders. They fund Hamas, they also operate Al Jazeera, which is just distorts the picture. Not in English, but in Arabic, it's a major source of incitement in the region. To use their leverage, and they have considerable leverage over Hamas, to achieve the release of the remainder of our hostages in the immediate time, to get the medicine that we put in there, that they promised that would reach our hostages.
But if Qatar does actually have the power to influence Hamas, what excuse is there for the hostages not having been released? Does Qatar have the influence or not? And if it does have the influence, why isn't it using it?
It has considerable influence, and I expect them to use it.
Are you confident they will?
No, but I expect them to do it.
And what are the repercussions if they don't?
Well, I think that the entire world is looking at Qatar, and they want to see if they use all the means at their disposal. They have significant means, and again, I expect them to do it, and I think other countries should as well.
What would, for instance, the United States be able to do about Qatar, or Great Britain, or other countries with?
That's something I'll speak to them directly about.
You'll speak to the leaders of Britain and America about that.
Mm-hmm. But I expect Qatar to live up to its promise, to use its influence and achieve the release of the hostages and the delivery of the medicines right away. It
complains, of course, that it's an intermediary. But do you think Qatar is an intermediary?
Well, look, I don't think they're an intermediary that is passive. I think they have enormous leverage on Hamas. And again, I'll say it the nth time. I expect them to use their leverage.
Let's come on to the bigger question then, Iran. Everywhere in the region, whether it's in Gaza, whether it's in Lebanon, whether it's in Yemen with the Houthis, everything leads back to Iran. Mm-hmm. how can you solve any of this without addressing the question of Iran? It seems to me you're at risk of fighting skirmishes in the Iranian war, but your prime enemy that says it wants to annihilate this country we're sitting in is still sitting in Tehran.
Yeah, well, I think that a total victory over Hamas will impact this larger contest, because people will see who's winning. Israel won or Iran won. The West won or Iran won. And I think that will have an influence on other countries in the region and other conflicts in the region. But secondly, there's a larger issue as well, and that's Iran's quest to develop nuclear weapons. Because if you can see what Iran is doing now without nuclear weapons. It's sending terrorists across the Middle East and the world. It's trying to subvert governments. It's using its Houthi proxies to block the international maritime route in the Red Sea. Its proxies are killing Americans as we speak.
In Iraq and...
Well, yes, in many places, not only there. And the question is, and attacking them continuously. So this is what Iran is doing without nuclear weapons. Now imagine they had nuclear weapons, and we understand, we can see in the world, what does it mean when you have a country that is aggressive in intent and has nuclear weapons? You could see what is happening with a much smaller country, a much less dangerous country, North Korea. It develops nuclear weapons, and half of Asia quakes in fear, can threaten Japan, and maybe very soon the United States itself. Well, Iran is different from North Korea because Iran has an ideology of domination and conquest and subjugation. They call us the small Satan. They call the U.S. the great Satan. They chant death to Israel, death to America. Can the United States, can Europe, can the civilized world allow such a regime to have nuclear weapons? And the answer is no. So the jury is out on all of us.
You've been calling for stronger international attention towards Iran for decades now. Mm-hmm. But yet Iran seems to have been getting closer to the bomb. Its influence in this region seems to have only widened. Whose failure is that?
Well, I think that we've delayed Iran's quest for the bomb, which was not obvious, but probably by a decade. But we haven't stopped it. I think my government worked. Sometimes I worked alone against the entire world. It said, we'll make a deal with them. The so-called JCPOA, that will stop them. Didn't stop them one bit. It gave them the means to develop centrifuges that can enrich uranium at far higher rates, and gave them billions of dollars to boot in order to develop their terror infrastructure and their military industries, which they're now using to help Russia. All of that was done against my warnings, and I fought alone, sometimes completely alone. But we did manage successive governments under my leadership and was able to halt Iran's march to the bomb, and sometimes with American support. I think that this is a vital interest of all of us, because Iran is different from other countries that possess nuclear weapons, with the exception of North Korea. I'm not sure that it has the careful calculus of cost and benefit that anyone holding nuclear weapons should have. It's not at all clear, because they're a theological thuggery. They're very aggressive, and they have a theology, a radical Islamic theology, which points them in direction not only of the conquest of the Middle East, but of global domination. Now, you may think, oh, that can't be true. It is true. It's exactly what animates them. And you wake up, Churchill, I think, used to say that democracies sleep until the jarring gong of danger wakes them up. Well, I think too many countries and too many leaders have been asleep too long. We have to act to assure that Iran will not have nuclear weapons. And I certainly intend to do so. If it's up to me, they won't have it. They're close on fissile material. They still have other problems to develop such weapons. And it's It's up to us, to all of us, and it's up to Israel too,
But
to make sure that doesn't happen.
Let's say you do actually manage to destroy Hamas in Gaza. Why would that deflect Iran from its major goal, as you describe it?
I didn't say that it would deflect it from the major
Or-
goal. I said that there are twin goals. One is to defeat Hamas in Gaza because it's trying to use its proxies
But why would
and
that-
other means to conquer the Middle East. Stop that. But secondly, and in parallel to that, act against Iran's attempt to develop nuclear weapons. You're quite right. They're two separate issues, but they're joined in the hip. And the hip is Iran's aggression and ideology, which has to be blocked here and there.
But just sort of finally on this point, I mean, since they've continued to push in the region, they continue to push at all of your borders, they continue to search for a nuclear weapon, surely, I mean, all of this is going to be the case unless there was a regime change in Tehran.
You're probably right.
Does anyone agree with you?
Well, I agree with you.
That's enough.
A few more.
Okay. As we start to draw to a close, let me bring us back to domestic issues in Israel. It seems to me that the Israeli public had suffered such a shock and are still going through a trauma about what happened on the 7th because they never believed that this was possible. They never believed, they believed that there were rockets that would come in. They knew that they'd had that for years. But they never thought it was possible that Hamas would break through and come right into Israel. Some people I speak to say in Israeli politics and security establishment that you had the conception wrong. That the conception was that Hamas wanted to be corrupt and get rich, and that the government, security services and others didn't believe that they actually wanted to do what they did on the 7th.
Well, it's actually, it may be true of some people, but it certainly wasn't true of me. Because I believe that we can't cut deals with Hamas. I called them ISIS many years ago. When they took over, I said, this is Hamastan. These people will work to attack us. I warned that they would rocket us. This was dismissed at the time that we left Gaza. I left the government before that happened. I resigned from the government. I said, this is what will happen. We'll have a terrorist state of these this Muslim Brotherhood branch that will seek to destroy Israel. So the question was, what do you do about it? And my conclusion was that we have to continuously cut these wild weeds. But we didn't get the agreement to actually yank out the weeds because, as I once said in a government meeting, I said this would require sacrificing hundreds of our soldiers and probably will end up having quite a few casualties on the Palestinian population, given Hamas's tactic of hiding behind civilians while attacking our civilians. And it will create other problems. We couldn't get the domestic consensus to make such a definitive solution to the problem of Hamas. That is, no one would agree across the Israeli public to go in and basically destroy Hamas, go throughout Gaza and destroy Hamas. We didn't have the international consensus either. Nobody would understand. Why are we doing it? Both conditions were created because of the Hamas savage attack on Israel on October 7th. But look how difficult it is for us to sustain this effort, which we are and which we're committed to achieve total victory, that after the worst, these horrific acts of barbarism, we now, 3-4 months into the battle, we have this critique of Israel. So my view was, we basically degrade their military capacities again and again and again. But I think that has changed now with the broad consensus of the Israeli public that we have to go in there and achieve total victory. There is no substitute for total victory.
Two final questions, if I may. Firstly, on your own, this happened, or let me put it this way, this happened on your watch as Prime Minister, October the 7th. A number of people, senior in the military and intelligence apparatus in this country, have taken some responsibility for it. Do you?
Well, I think there's a responsibility and a mission of a government to protect its people, and clearly we failed in that. And all of us will have to answer questions. When at the end of the war, there will be investigations, there will be systemic examination of what went wrong, and responsibilities will be assigned. That's fine. I'm not concentrating on that now. I'm concentrating on one responsibility that I have, and that is to win this war and achieve total victory. And I think that's what we should all concentrate on.
You're the longest-serving prime minister in Israeli history, and you've seen political leaders come and go, a bewildering number among your allies. How many presidents is it now?
Who's counting?
Of the United States?
I'm not counting.
You've been in this a long time. There's a famous statement that was made of Joseph Chamberlain, not of Neville Chamberlain, but of Joseph Chamberlain, that all political careers end in failure. Do you think that's the case with you?
I don't care.
You don't care?
No, I don't care. This whole, the whole legacy obsession is one that I don't really care very much for. I'll tell you why. Because first of all, it depends who writes the history. And history now is being rewritten in Wikipedia and all that. People just distort history. You can't really control that. What you can do in the time allotted to you on this earth is to do your best to serve the purpose that you dedicate your life for. I've dedicated my life to ensuring that in the coming decades, Israel will be as strong and as powerful and as prosperous, to ensure the questionable permanence of anything, but the permanence of the Jewish state. I say that with a philosophical observation that what is permanent? But that's what I'm allocating and dedicating my efforts to. So I don't really care about that question. You can't control it. Unless, as Churchill said, you write it yourself. Well,
you could write it yourself. You've already
I did.
started.
I wrote
You've
an autobiography. Yes, I did. But that's just to have my record there. But, the forces that distort public opinion are so vast, not only in Israel, that seek to distort it. And the thing that I draw encouragement from, because I go around the country and I talk to our soldiers, I talk to the reserve officers, I talk to members of the public, and they basically get it. They get it, that I'm leading the charge for total victory, that I'm representing them in many ways, and they appreciate it, and I see that. I met a very famous entertainer in Israel, and he belongs to the left. And we met on one of these many events that he was appearing in, and I came there as well. And he said, "Prime Minister, can I talk to you for a second?" And I said, "Sure." He said, "I don't belong to your camp, but I want to tell you something. I go around the country, and what I see about the war and about you is diametrically opposed to everything that I hear in these various, in the mainstream television studios, which are all very hostile, okay? That's not what I hear. It's not the polls that they publish. I'm telling you, it's fundamentally different. And you know something? I go around, and when I talk to the people, and I talk to our soldiers, I'm telling you, he's right. Legacy put aside, victory put forward, achieve it.
So there's another chapter in the biography of Benjamin Netanyahu.
It's not my biography that counts. It's not my biography. It doesn't help. The sands of time, will wash away, the waves will wash away everything, all the footprints in the sand. That's what happens. But, we have to do what we can in the time that we have available to defend this country and to assure its future. And that's what I'm doing. That's what I care about.
Prime Minister Netanyahu, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.